It is a real pleasure for me to be here with you today, particularly here at the Heron School of Art and Design. And this is an institution that has just meant a great deal to me over the years. First as a student, and then briefly as faculty. I served on the board of the Alumni Association and currently serve on the Dean's Advisory Board with Dean Hall. So it's very meaningful for me to be back in this space, and like everyone was recommending, please stop in the galleries too. That's not just today. The gallery exhibitions and free lectures rotate all the time, so there's always something great happening here, so it's worth getting on your schedules. All right, we have two big dots there. All right. So a theme that presented itself as I was thinking about this is reflection. There's a great deal of reflection in a certain segment of the work that we do. But this word also got me thinking about the origins of design in my own life and how design entered my life and how I've been able to interpret it as the years go by. So my dad was in the military and my mom was from Sweden, but together they shared this sensibility and appreciation for like a Scandinavian design aesthetic, so sort of a simplicity. So as a result, our house was always filled with teak furniture and Swedish ceramics and artworks and things like that. So we grew up with this all around us, and of course, as kids, this did not matter one bit at all to my brother and I. We could not have cared at all, but like so many things in your family life, it sinks into you and sort of becomes a part of you too. So here we are. This is my brother and myself in all of our mid-1970s glory. Just for reference purposes, we'll call him Golden Toadstool and call me Silky Pumpkin. So. There were not a lot of hairstyles in the mid-70s for boys, but we sort of took what we could get. But I have the pleasure of working with John. So here we are, all grown up, feeling sexy in our Canadian tuxes, feeling pretty good. John's back there too. John, I cannot believe how good we look in these pictures. We've worked together for about 20 years, and I think just looking at this gives you some sense of what it's like in our studio from a day-to-day basis, too. It's pretty much always like that. Well, enough silliness. So people ask me what it's like to work with John, and they usually say, if I had to work with my brother, we would probably kill each other, or it would be the best thing of all time, too. And so in 20 years, we have not yet killed each other, so I would put it in the second category. Everything that I'll show you today was touched by the hand of John, which is weirder now saying it than it was at home in my basement, but, but it is true. We work on everything together, so. Our studio, which you can barely see here, it's called Commercial Artisan, and that was a name that we came up with when we started working together, which we thought was kind of funny. It's a reference to an outdated expression called commercial artist, which is what graphic designers used to be called. We chose the word artisan because we thought it was kind of goofy and silly, not knowing that 20-some years in the future, every company on earth would be using the word artisan, but we still think it's goofy, and we were there first, so. In the 90s, the head of the graphic design program at the Cranbrook Academy of Art, Catherine McCoy, wrote an article for Design Quarterly magazine, and she posed this question: what is graphic design? And suggested that it was art, science, business, or craft, or some combination of all of these things. When I think about that question, my answer is very simple and very straightforward. For me, graphic design is solving problems with pictures and words. So when I was a student at Heron in the 1980s, there were two schools of faculty. There was an older, more established kind, and their methodologies were really rooted in modernism. So we were exposed to work like this, and designers like Paul Rand and Lester Beale, Alvin Lustig. This is really beautiful, kind of timeless work that remains really strong all of these years later. But at the same time, there was another group of faculty that were younger, and they were interested in different types of design that were emerging at that point, that were more technologically driven and that were more personally expressive, more idiosyncratic, and not necessarily concerned so much with problem solving. So on one hand, I was learning the rules, but simultaneously, I was learning to break them. And so I think for my age group and the time that I was at Heron, that was a really kind of unique moment that I think has not happened since then. And I think this continues to sort of inform the way that I go about projects today. So I'd just like to take you through a couple of them. One is called Past is Present. That was the name of an exhibition that was here at Heron a couple of years ago in all 3 galleries. It was a major exhibition. And we were asked to design the catalog, which is the record of that show. So the full title is Past is Present, Black Artists Respond to the Complicated Histories of Slavery. So it's obviously a very kind of heavy topic, a weighty topic as well. After I saw the exhibition and saw all the art in the show, there was a print that I was really drawn to by an artist named Marcus Morris, and that's the print that you see as the background on the book cover. I thought this was fantastic. The way that the figure sort of appears and disappears, sometimes in whole, sometimes partially. I thought it was very ambiguous, but it was, I thought, a perfect metaphor for the thesis of the show, which is the way that slavery colors every aspect of our life in modern day. It doesn't go away. It's always there. And so when you think of the cover of a book, you might think that's an opportunity to make it something very direct and very straightforward. But we took a different tact on this too, making it much more muddy and kind of ambiguous. And even the way that the type is handled on the front fades in and out of the background image. When you get into the interior of the catalog, it's a totally different story. Here, everything is very clean. Everything is on a really tight grid. It's Helvetica type, and it's all very well organized. That ambiguity only reappears in certain parts, like on the forward page, where the detail of Loban Hamilton's piece kind of fades in and out too, and sort of is murky in the same way that the cover is. But otherwise, it's all a very kind of clear and straightforward presentation. The absolute centerpiece of this show is the artwork in the upper right corner. That's correct, yeah, it's upper right corner, by South African artist Mary Sibande. And it was a huge piece that really was in the center of the exhibition. And the colors of that figure could not really be ignored. The dark blue and the light blue were so prominent, that really became the drive for the color palette that we used in the catalog. So the type, it may be difficult to see there, is a match for that dark blue. And then the footnotes are in the light blue. So it was all tying back into that piece. There were also historical documents from the slavery era that were included, mixed in with the artwork in the exhibition. But we created this presentation and showed them in all their decay and sort of decrepitness on a solid black background, just a very stark kind of presentation for that sort of information. So I'll shift gears. Another project that we really enjoy is called the AIA Year in Review. And AIA is the American Institute of Architects. It's the local chapter. And the Year in Review is kind of like an annual report, a sort of look back at the previous year's activities. So the way that it works is every year there is a new president, and that president chooses a programming theme around which all of their events are based. And then at the end of the year, when it's time to sort of create this document, we take that positioning theme and do a visual interpretation. And so it's occurred to me that we've done this for 24 years, which is probably longer than most of you have been alive, but it's a favorite. And it always ends up being the same size. It just ends up looking like a very designy kind of deck of cards when it's all finished. So the one in the lower right corner is the most recent. And the theme was color outside the lines. And what we didn't want to do was just have some kind of, Crayola sort of expressive thing. Why make it exciting and colorful when you can make it plain and linear? So that was our approach too. So the type is oriented in all different directions on the cover. It's at all different sizes too, but the weight of the line remains the same. So no matter what size it is, it's always the same sort of weight too. So the black type is a shiny foil stamp printed over a very light kind of lilac type too that creates this sort of dimensional composition. And then on the inside, most of these things are just beautiful photographs of award-winning architecture. So there's lots of really lovely kinds of images. But there are moments where you can sort of bring back that idea from the cover. The president that year had the most incredible purple hair. And so it was suggested that we use that to honor her too. So I like that combination of black and this sort of lilac color that goes throughout this whole piece. So if you're a graphic designer, inevitably someone will ask you to design a logo. It's just part of it. And so, yeah, they're tough projects, I will say. But about 5 years ago, this company, Rundell Ernstberger Associates, hired us to redo their logo. The original partners were no longer active in the day-to-day. And this is a business that had been around for 40 years. And they are concerned with urban design, planning, and landscape architecture. So we worked with their communications team and then an outside consultant to develop concepts to move forward. And so this is the kind of thing that we would show them in the initial presentation. Now, each one of these 6 options also had color variations and a whole lot of stuff, like what does it look like on a hat or what does it look like on a sign? We just try to give them a sense of how all of this might work in the real world for them. The other thing that happened here is COVID hit, so we started doing this in person and then had to switch to Zoom, where we had, it seemed like 100 different people weighing in, but miraculously, in our first presentation, they gravitated to one direction. It was this one, and I was happy because this is one that I really liked as well. So here's how it looks kind of in the complete version. It's the very simple letter forms with the full name of the company underneath it. Because the name is such a mouthful, REA is really the shorthand for what this company is, and that's really what everybody calls it too. So very simple, but the custom letter forms, we drew those and built them out of these sort of segments that you see, and each one of the colors represents some aspect of what the company is involved in. So the green is for flora, the blue represents water, and then the gray, we call it the man-made world. It's really asphalt. All of these together sort of combine to give this meaning, and this is now what they're using today. So when the logo's complete, the next step is establishing this brand standards manual. So this is something that people would use when they're working with the logo. If it's not us, it might be somebody else. These are kind of grueling projects. They're really detail heavy. I think theirs ended up being something like 40 pages long. Here are just 12 pages, but it shows you how does the logo look on an ad? How do the tertiary color palettes work? And things like that too. So they're very, very obsessive and only rewarding when they're finished, I think, because then the obsessive compulsive part of you can look back and say, okay, done, and it's packed with information. So I'll just walk you through a couple of other recent logo projects too. This one is for a company called Thread, and they're an interior design company that specializes in fine cabinetry. And I think what appealed to them about this was sort of the arts and crafts nature of this typeface, the little details at the top of the H, the way that the tail of the R is kind of goofy and wonky. We altered the typeface to create the ligature between the E and the A, and then also kind of adjusted all of the center strokes to create a subtle visual thread going through the middle of the word. The Friends of Broad Ripple Park are a group of do-gooders who take care of that park and arrange all the events there. They've done a tremendous amount of work and have big plans for the future. They had not had a new logo for a couple of decades, so they asked us to create this. They liked the idea of a seal-styled logo, all contained in a circle, with kind of elegant, slightly Art Deco type, which relates to the park's history as an amusement park in the 1910s. Very simple in that it has a bright color palette representing different aspects of the park, and then very basic kind of linear drawing of trees and water. Some of you might remember the IC. That stands for Indianapolis Contemporary, and it was the last incarnation of the Indianapolis Museum of Contemporary Art. When they made this switch, we worked with their communications people and the director at the time to create this logo. Now, the logo is really just the square in the center where it says IC, which works in any color that you want to use it with. But we created the series of shapes and colors and forms to give them tools to play with. So these would appear in any combination they wanted on signage or on swag, collateral, whatever it was. Sadly, after we did this, about a year later, the group folded, so it was never really implemented, but it was on their website for a while. I still really like this, and I like how active and vibrant and bold everything is with this, but sadly, it just lives in history at this point. PAD is the name of a small architecture firm. So in addition to being like your groovy pad, the word is comprised of the first letter of the last names of all of the principal partners too, so P, A, and D. And for this, we just went very geometric and very, very basic, drew it on a grid, made out of circles and squares and just these linear forms. So it's all spaced very evenly. I think it's interesting, as a stencil, it doesn't really even necessarily read as PAD immediately. Maybe that's a secondary identification, but I think it's recognizable just sort of as a series of kind of basic geometric forms. And then they introduced a whole bunch of different colors. I like this purple and pink kind of variation too, but that's how that one ended up. So we really enjoy working with artists, and Lauren Zoll is a local artist. She is one of our favorites and a good friend. And a few years ago, she was commissioned to create a sculpture that she called Bending Light. And this was almost like a sunburst kind of design that was created out of these lucite tubes that you see in the second image. She was very interested in light refraction and how imagery could be warped by these kinds of tubes. This was also a project that was built in Shelton Heights Park on the southwest side of downtown, and meant to sort of help reactivate this community that had seen better days before. So we created this piece. It's a big piece, sort of like a tabloid, that's meant to be something you can use to interact with the sculptures. There's a section with a little bit about the scientific principle of refraction. We worked with a scientist to make sure we got our wording right. We are not scientists. I will not claim to be that. And then there were all of these patterns and words and sort of backwards type that get distorted when you hold these up to the lucite rods like that little figure is doing. And then there's also a part about the idea, how the piece evolved in Lauren's mind, and then also how it was constructed in the park. So in the end, this is the fully unfolded cover. And so you see people walking around like this with, with all the rods. And it was just meant to be very playful. The sculpture is still there. These are just stacked up in an old newspaper box, so you can just come and grab one and check out the sculpture too. A lot of you will be familiar with the Bigger Picture Show. This is the event in which artists, designers are asked to reinterpret classic movie posters, and then those posters are auctioned to benefit the film festival. I want to show you these images. I have always loved the band The Smiths, and one of the things I love the most is the way that they use their album covers and sleeve designs to sort of create this world that the music and the images can both live in. These are very, very simple designs, like the orange one. I think it's just printed in orange, just a one-color design, but I thought, really emblematic of the music. And one of the things I like the best about this is the interaction with the faces that appear on. Sometimes these are very famous people, and sometimes they are very normal, everyday people too. But this idea of sort of engaging with someone's face, I think is a really powerful tool to incorporate. So in looking back at all 14 of the posters that I have done for the Bigger Picture Show, I noticed that I've employed a similar technique, not in all of them, but in most of them, with this idea of some kind of face or some sort of gaze that the viewer would interact with and hopefully have some kind of relationship with. So I thought it might be interesting just to look back at a couple of these and talk about how I arrived at those solutions. So the movie Rebecca is the Alfred Hitchcock movie from 1940. And when I was a kid, my mom took me to Sweden to visit our family. I do not speak Swedish. I wish I did. So I couldn't really communicate, and there was nothing in English on TV until this movie Rebecca came on. And so, yes, I was a 7-year-old fan of English Gothic romance movies, and I stand by that. It's fantastic. So I watched Rebecca, and it worked its way into my brain. So beginning with this, I thought it was important to sort of focus in on a particular scene in the movie, and this is a really tense scene. You can just tell by their crazy expressions. I thought this is a pivotal moment in the film and a really good opportunity to focus in on some interesting characters. So once I decided on that, I thought cropping in makes it even better and more intimate. So, you have these two people. It's suddenly, when you crop it that way, it's almost like you're right there with them. You're sort of up right in their faces. Now, because I had seen this movie on TV, it's always a TV movie in my memory. So this video texture in the background became part of the design. And within the story, the letter R, it appears all the time, but it's this kind of big, kind of frilly cursive R. I didn't want to use that, but I did want to incorporate R, and I love this typeface called Trade Gothic. And notice that there are a couple different versions of it, and that when you overlay them, you can see what the differences are. And so here, by doing that, it almost creates a vibrating effect that looks like a bad TV picture from the 1970s. So I thought, perfect. So that's how that one ended up. Sunset Boulevard is the 1950 movie by Billy Wilder about the fading and pretty well around the bend demented movie star Norma Desmond. This is the climax of the movie when she's having her big moment, and that face is just too great to ignore. So I had to zero in on that. Now, at the same time, I had become interested in the work of a conceptual artist named John Stieseker, who does these collages out of old Hollywood publicity stills and postcards, simply just by cutting them up and rearranging them. And I thought they're so disturbing and kind of weird, but I love this idea of kind of rearranging the human face again. So that entered into the thinking, as did the trashy Hollywood magazines of the 1950s and that kind of aesthetic. So the coarse dots you see in Norma's face kind of come from that sort of bad printing idea. And I'm a big fan of postcards as found imagery or sources for inspiration. So I found these 3 postcards from Los Angeles around the time that this movie came out. So it's the car culture, it's an almost seedy kind of nighttime activity, and then that became the framing device for the face, and then created this strange little S&M mask for Norma that I think makes it a little bit more disturbing or a little bit unsettling. I added the type in a transparent layer over her face, too, and I almost think you don't need it. I mean, it's hardly there at all, too, but maybe in a subtle way, it's good to have that there. So Sid and Nancy are the doomed punk rock couple, and I will say there is not a bad picture of them. There is also not a good picture of them, and I looked at a lot, and I thought, once I found this one that's on the poster, I thought that was just perfect. I mean, it's almost like an official portrait, and I thought it looked just beautiful and tragic and sort of like if you did not have enough germs in your life, you would be friends with them, because that's just sort of how they are. I was also really enjoying this book cover series that Pelican and Penguin put out in the 1960s. These were designed by Germano Fassetti with photography by Roger Main. And all the books deal with these problems of society, like these issues that people wanted to deal with at the time. And again, the reproduction is so simple and so beautiful. It's just really clean, straightforward type, a photo, and some color. So that made me think I should turn the poster into one of these book covers. I love the work of Jamie Reed, who was the designer for the Sex Pistols, and so wanted to incorporate something of that and make it look really grungy, as if the book cover had been around for a while and had probably been run over by one of these buses. But it was still important to retain accurate details, like the correct typography, making sure that we used the right penguin emblem at the time. And then there were nods to the film as well, like the 85-cent sticker relates to 1985 when the movie came out. The quote at the bottom is an actual quote, not about Sid and Nancy, but from one of the other books that I just thought was kind of funny. So that's that one. So when John started working with me, we began thinking about how can we promote our studio? What do we do to get the word out and tell people how great we are? We knew how great we were, but we wanted everyone else to know too. And one of the ideas was to create like a self-promotional brochure, something that would show our work. And I think, if you've looked at any graphic designer's website and you go to the About section and you read what they write about themselves, it is cringy. It is always just weird and it sounds wrong. So we were struggling with this too, about talking about ourselves, and began to wonder, well, what would it be like if we got to do a self-promotional piece, but we did it about somebody else and someone that we admired? And so we quickly began to think about who that would be, and we decided it would be these people. On the left is Jean Lacey, on the right is Jackie Lacey. And they were a married couple. In addition to having been my in-laws at the time, they worked as designers, artists, illustrators, and educators in Indianapolis, probably for 40 years. And they were barely known here, and they certainly weren't known anywhere else. So it struck me as being a real shame that they had this full body of work that nobody was really familiar with. So here are some examples that are clearly rooted in modernism. That was the time period that they were working in. But I think their work has this kind of humanistic touch too, so it's warmer. It's not kind of like a cold, stark modernism. It's much more friendly than that. And if they were known for anything, it's probably this St. Vincent logo in the center. Some of you might remember that. It was designed in the 1970s and was used just up until a few years ago when Ascension took over and then retired it, which I'm still mad about, but anyway, so we thought, let's do it. Let's create a publication about the Lacey's. And we worked with their daughter, Amy, and put together a publication that we ended up calling Commercial Article, which we thought was a really clever play on our studio name, Commercial Artisan, not ever thinking that years in the future, this would be the most confusing thing for everybody. Nobody knows our studio, nobody knows Commercial Article. So, but we didn't consider it to be an ongoing project at that time. It was just sort of a one-off. Oh, if you're familiar with Broad Ripple and you know the train car there, the Lacey's had their studio in that train car in the 1970s for a time. So there's Jean working away in the studio. So in the end, we created this. It was this two-part publication, a black and white biographical piece, and then a full-color piece that showcased their work. The work was disappearing. At that time, Jean had passed away. Jackie was alive, but struggling with dementia, and the only collection of their work were in portfolios that were under her bed. And so we literally were going through these old portfolios, finding work that we could then scan or digitize and reproduce in this way, too. So this serves really as the only record of their work. So after a while, we began to think there could be other stories that we wanted to tell, and we started to think about this being an ongoing project. In 2009, I received a Creative Renewal Fellowship from the Arts Council, and that allowed me to travel, and I went back to Sweden and completely by chance stumbled on this exhibition about this woman. Her name's Greta Magnusson Grossman, and she was an architect and a designer in Sweden and later Los Angeles. She also designed these beautiful lamps, and this is a really popular design today. It's resurfaced and I think is gaining new life. And it was fascinating to learn about her, but something about her reminded me of someone else that I had heard about at home, and that was this woman, Avriel Shull. So I came back with renewed vigor, thinking this could be our publication. We would look at design figures from Indiana whose stories were maybe not that well known, and then that's really kind of the thesis that we use today. So we found a writer named Connie Ziegler, who was the authority on Avriel, and she agreed to write with us, and then we created this piece. I think at this point, we were just giving these away to people. We didn't really have a plan for this being kind of like a publication that we could market. It was just more like a weird hobby. But here you see some of her work. She began as a graphic designer. She was also a Heron student, interestingly. So this follow-up issue is about Marshall Studios, and this is the company of Jane and Gordon Martz, who worked in Petersburg, Indiana for many, many years. Their work was included in the Museum of Modern Art Good Design shows. And with this issue, we began to experiment a little bit with the format of the piece. So it almost unfolds kind of like a newspaper. So you have this timeline that runs across the top, and then this sort of ongoing story with images inset into that. And then when it's completely opened, it's a poster. And this reproduces their lamp that was at MoMA at the actual size that it was created. So even if you don't have a Marshall Studios lamp, you can have one just by putting the poster up. Leslie Ayers was an architect in the 1930s through the 1950s, and he was sort of a dashing man about town. He was also an expert architectural renderer and created drawings like this one to help convince city officials that they should fund building projects like the Circle Tower. Now, from my point of view, this is an absolutely epic drawing, and I would say yes, yes, yes if I saw that too. It's such a beautiful building now, but I think seeing it that way was particularly impressive to people. Some of you will recognize this, Fletcher Place. If you know where the restaurant Bluebeard is today, this is the Bluebeard building, except this is how it appeared in the 1930s. So maybe a little bit more color, a little bit more signage, but this was a rendering that he did, and I think it's an interesting kind of way to compare. Walter Dorwin Teague was a designer from Pendleton, and he was known as the Dean of Industrial Design. He created this cash register-shaped building for the World's Fair, which is just fantastic. It tallies up the attendance totals in the little screen at the top. But he began as what we would call a graphic designer and created these really interesting, highly detailed borders that then became known as Teague borders. But he really went on to design everything like the Bo Brownie camera, drink packaging, airplanes, this beautiful Texaco gas station. Here he is now, and sometimes when we are researching these people, we learn things about them that we didn't expect to learn, and we discovered that Walter Dorwin Teague is the only practicing nudist that we have ever profiled before, that we know of. Just let you live with that for a moment. I'll bet a lot of you have seen this. This is down off of Delaware Street, downtown. It's what was once called the Urban Wall, and here's how it looked in 1973. It was brand new at that time, and this was the result of a competition for a public art piece that was won by an artist-designer named Roland Hobart. And Roland Hobart, pioneer in super graphics, came from Austria to Shelbyville in the mid-1960s and won this competition. He was really regarded as an expert silkscreen printer and consulted all over the world. Here's just a few of the pieces he did, a print series for the Indianapolis sesquicentennial. There you can see a little glimpse of the urban wall and its incredible bright colors. And of course his Jimmy Carter thermometer, which who wouldn't want that? So when we did this issue, it was to be used to convince people to fund a restoration of the wall. And for a while, we heard that that was going to happen. Then COVID hit, and suddenly that whole discussion disappeared. So part of the wall is still there on one side of the building, but I hope that at some point in the future, there is an effort to restore that beautiful piece. We did an issue all about the signs and symbols of Indiana. So these are corporate logos, things like the ball jar, Burger Chef. There are flags, the Indianapolis and Indiana flag, the state seal. We worked with maybe 11, I think, different writers to tell the story. And this is the cover of the issue, which almost works like a little puzzle. Like, can you identify these little bits and pieces of all these logos? And then it was our 10th issue, so there's a big number 10 kind of in the background that wraps around. That was a fun one. I'm very proud of this cover. This is Xenia Miller with Alexander Girard in his Santa Fe studio. They are reviewing plans for the Miller House, one of the most important and famous residences in the world. And this is like an actual architectural moment. This picture was taken by her husband, J. Irwin Miller, and was in the family collection that was put in an archive at the Historical Society. So outside of the family, this photo had never been seen, had never been published, and working with the archivist there, we were able to have it digitized and use it for the cover. So for me, that was a real coup. So here's the interior of the Miller House, and it shows you probably the most famous feature of the house, which is the conversation pit, which includes all of these beautiful textiles. Alexander Girard realized that when you're sitting in the pit, you're looking up, you're seeing the bottom of the piano, and he wanted that to coordinate with the textiles. So if you're ever there, look under the piano, and you will see that it's bright red down there to match the textiles that are in the pit. Fun fact number 2, the piano was designed by our old nudist buddy, Walter Dorwin Teague. Love it when it all comes together like that. Here's another Heron story, too. This is an issue about Stupid Incorporated, and this is a company that specialized in kind of gag gifts and crazy sorts of stationaries. They would have these funny cartoons with these die-cut holes, and it would be a hysterical joke on every page. The company was formed in 1959 by these guys, Dane, Don, and Dick. Very Mad Men era here. They had been students at Heron. They went to Korea during the Korean War and came back and started this company that they wanted to be a novelty company that would, do better than the hula hoop. And for several years, they did great. Their products were all over the country. They were in England. And then little by little, they drifted off into other things too. They probably wanted to make some money, and they had careers in advertising and graphic design and things like that. But if you search Stupid Incorporated, you will find no record of it other than our publication. So this becomes, I think, an important document of that kind of creativity that would have otherwise completely disappeared into a dumpster someplace. We did an issue about the arts and crafts movement and how Indianapolis artists and designers were impacted by that too. And it's really the story of 2 couples, Joseph and Janet and Helen and Brant. Incidentally, Helen and Brant were among the initial group of faculty at Heron when it opened in 1902. But they all contributed in really amazing ways. Joseph was the publisher of a magazine called Modern Art. And Janet was a silversmith who created these really weird kinds of silver pieces. Helen was a designer, an illustrator, and Brant did everything. He was a photographer, a potter, an illustrator, interior designer, and sort of amateur architect at the same time. So they were quite the creative group. They all happened to belong to this organization called the Portfolio Club. This was around during the era when they lived, but shockingly, it is still around today. I went to one of their meetings, and they have a speaker, they have a meal together, they sit around and talk about creative things. They also create these pieces that you see on the right that are sort of their year in review. It's a document of that particular year. These are all in the collections at the library, and they're an incredible kind of timeline of design trends and styles. It's worth looking up online to take a look at them. So this was not the meeting that I attended. I don't really know what's happening here, but this photo just kind of cracks me up. I just like the expressions of the people there. Like, there's, this guy, for instance, he's like, nothing to see here, nothing weird about this at all. But then, like, there's this guy who's like, So I just am showing that to you to make you uncomfortable, really. So that brings us up to our brand new issue. This one has just come out. It's all about a woman named Dale Messick. She was from Hobart, Indiana, and kind of a pioneering cartoonist. She created a strip called Brenda Starr Reporter that she produced for over 40 years. She wrote it and she drew it. And I learned that when she drew these things, she did it with a brush, not a pen. So imagine doing some of this line work with like a single-haired brush. Just, I think, incredible. But these are crazy stories, too. There's romance, there's action, there's crime, there's mermaids. It really has it all. And here are just a few spreads from this issue. Like, she just looks like she's so much fun, just up there getting the morning milk, We created this sort of compendium of the supporting cast just for their crazy names like Pesky Miller and things like that. But anyway, we have all of our issues out in the hallway, and feel free to go take a look at them. They're for sale there if you like to. Oh, I forgot to mention too, we got the opportunity to work with Debbie Millman on this issue. We had learned that she was a fan of Brenda Starr, and so we just said, hey, Debbie, and she's like, yes, I will do it. So we were thrilled. So she contributed an essay to this about how Brenda Starr really had become kind of a lifeline for her as a young person. So that was kind of thrilling itself. So now we have a total of 16 issues. And I think for us, the big thing about this is that it's a project that has really transformed and something that we've become known for over the years. And it's turned from being a kind of self-promotional tool for us into becoming this repository and this archive of Indiana design information. Right now, our focus is to try to get these in different collections. So we have these in libraries and archives, so future researchers will have the tools to explore these figures in more depth. So I think with that, I'll wrap it up. I think I'm at about time, and just say thank you. It has been so nice for me to be here with you today. I appreciate everybody coming out in the rain. So.